In those breakout spaces, we really want you to have a chance to share different strategies with each other to increase the peer-to-peer engagement in these online learning environments. And of course, the ability to discuss between one another, discuss the adaptability of these breakout rooms for achieving group work and discussions in class. So that's our goals for today. And then just real quickly here's our agenda, what we have planned for today. We have 3 activities that we're going to run through with you. The first activity, we're going to do a think, pair, share together. That'll be your first chance to be in a breakout room. And then activity 2, we're going to have you in a bit larger groups of 6 or 7 people, for example, brainstorming and documenting on those collaborative slides that we have you open in a different tab. And then finally, the last activity, we're going to have you walk through, do a gallery walk, and walking through and visiting what the other groups documented on their slides. So those are the 3 activities we have planned. We have a really short time for some debrief, but then in the end, as Kari mentioned, both of us are staying behind for an extra half an hour. So from 2 o'clock to 2:30, that'll be a time for a bit more open conversation. So any questions that do come up, I see the chat is great. A lot of you conversing there, which is fantastic. So any questions that do come up, Jens might be pulling those questions and putting them on our second to last slide around questions, and we'll have more chance there for conversation. For any of you who are able to stay for that, please feel free. If not, that's fine too. All right. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do then is we're going to get to know a little bit more about you. In this space right now, we don't have the chance to do full introductions, but what we're asking you to do is let us know how about your experience using active learning in online contexts. So using the chat and using the emoticons, send us either a thumbs up if you have used active learning in online, or a thumbs down if you haven't. And there, as you see the chat, you can see both of these coming along. I see thumbs up, thumbs down. Yeah, so real varied experiences coming out here. Absolutely. So for some of you who have done some of this online, this active learning online, it's going to be really valuable when you're in these breakout rooms together to share with one another. So that's great. And then the other thing, in Blackboard Collaborate, you also have the ability to poll people pretty quickly. You can put together a class poll. And so Kari and I put this poll here. We're acknowledging that the class sizes that you teach really make a difference for how you're going to design your active learning. So really quickly here, we want you to think about the class that you're currently working on, that you're currently preparing. And I've given 5 options there of class size. And then what you're looking at right there is the slide. And I'm just creating this poll right now as I'm talking to you. And now you should be able to see the poll there, and you should be able to click your responses from 1 to 5. Okay, so I'll give you a short couple seconds here for all of you to respond to this poll, and then I'll share it back with you. Okay, a couple more people. So this polling is an interesting feature. I'm just annotating here because you also have annotating access here in Blackboard. So this rectangle box is the poll I created there while I was talking to you on the fly, and it's landing on top of the slide. So I had prepared the slide, and then I was able to create that poll. So it's kind of interesting that that can happen in real time. And now real quickly, I'm going to share that poll back to you. You should all be able to see the responses now in purple. I see a large cluster of people. 13 people are teaching class sizes from 21 to 50. And then we have a range in all the other class sizes coming in there. I'm just going to mention, for those of you who are teaching really large classes of 250 and above, you probably already know Blackboard doesn't support more than 250 students. So you're probably, for synchronous teaching, using Zoom or something like that. And it has really, really similar breakout rooms that just arranged slightly differently, as you know, with the technology, but very, very similar to what you're going to experience today. Okay, so I'm going to stop polling. Okay, thanks for that, everybody. And now I'm going to get us into our next activity here. We're going to do a think, pair, share. So the first part of the think, pair, share, I want you all to take, we're going to take a minute here, and I want you to think about some of the active learning techniques that you typically use in your courses to encourage peer-to-peer engagement and student discussion. So we're going to take one kind of small silent minute here as you're either thinking or writing down some of your ideas, okay? I'm going to give you all a minute until we go into breakout space. Okay, just a couple seconds left there. Okay, thanks for that, everybody. So I've given you that minute to think on your own. And now if we were in a classroom, I would typically ask you to pair up with somebody close to you and kind of share back your list or share back your ideas. So here's where we're now going to practice the breakout rooms for the first time. You're going to find yourself in a breakout space randomly assigned with a partner. You're going to have 3 minutes in that breakout space, okay, to share your different active learning techniques that you use, and maybe even think about which ones you either know or you really hope are going to be adapted to the online space. Okay, we're going to give you 3 minutes to do that. And just so you know, when you're in these breakout rooms, we will be sending each time a 1-minute warning through the chat, but obviously you're only going to see that if you're paying attention to the chat. So that's kind of a good habit to get into when you're in these breakout spaces, is to be sure you're able to pay attention to also what's happening in that chat. Okay, so Kari, are the breakout rooms ready?
Yeah, so I'm just going to briefly tell you what I'm doing here. In the breakout room option, it gives you the chance to randomly assign or to do a custom assignment. I'm randomly assigning everybody. And the other thing that's good to do, which we learned the hard way the first time, is that you need to untick the box for including moderators in group assignment, because you want to keep all the moderators out of the group and in the main room. And so you can enter up to 20 groups. Based on our numbers, the fact that we want pairs, I have 16 groups of 2 attendees. So I'm going to go ahead and put you into those rooms and keep your eye out in about 2 minutes for the 1-minute warning that will be bringing you back. Enjoy.
Okay. Hello, everybody. We have just brought you back to the main room. Welcome back, everybody. You might want to put yourselves back on mute because probably in your small groups, you had yourself unmuted. You might have been sharing your video of yourself and whatnot. So great. We have you back. And now we're going to do the third part of the Think, Pair, Share. We're going to have you share back some of your conversations. So there's a couple different ways we can do this, right? If we had a smaller class, we might want to hear back from every group. But here today we have 36 people. We're not really able to hear back from every group. So I'm going to ask all of you, please feel free to let us know just one of the different techniques that you discussed and share it in the chat there for your peers. They can see the different techniques people were chatting about. I see Jigsaw coming, a couple more. And then if one or two people feel like they want to speak out, that would be great. If you want to raise your hand using the raise your hand feature, and then I can call on you and you can verbally speak out just maybe one of the techniques that you discussed with your peers in that breakout space. So if we have some brave souls, feel free to raise your hand. The rest of you feel free to write it there in the chat. And maybe Jens, as people are writing in the chat, you can feel free to read those out from the chat.
Yeah, so we have quite a few. So Jigsaw, World Cafe, writing on the whiteboard, having peers complete a worksheet, case studies, more worksheets, peers working on calculations together. It's a question how to do this. So you might want to look into shared editing software, maybe Google Sheets. Just remember to keep students logging in, well, keeping them anonymous.
Great.
Again, whiteboard annotations, short answer questions, team quizzes, gallery walks, clickers using reef polling. And before someone talked about using Canvas quizzes instead of the poll function if you want to associate names with answers.
Right. Yep, that's a great idea. Yeah, somebody's asking. I see a few people in the chat asking some different questions to each other. Hopefully they'll have some chance to do that in their small groups or in the end. Okay, thanks for that, Jens. I don't have any brave souls who have wanted to raise their hand and verbally give some feedback, so that's fine too. So what I'm going to ask you all to do now is you have been writing here in the chat, and then I asked Jens to sort of read those out, the different things. And if I can ask you now to shift your attention to that set of Google Slides that we shared with you that you have open in a separate tab. And if you can go to slide 12, what you'll see on slide 12 is that Kari has been here scribing the different ideas that she heard, mostly coming through from Jens this time. And you'll see them all there documented on slide 12, and now we can see them. So that's definitely using these Google Slides is one way. You know, people could have just, rather than writing in the chat, we could have asked you to just on your own write those down there, and we will be doing that a little later on. All right. So we just wanted to give you an idea of some of that share back and the different ways you could perhaps doing some of that sharing back from your students when they're coming back from groups. All right, so Kari, I think I'm turning it over to you for our next activity.
Okay, great. So the next thing we'll be doing is collaborative slide building. Your task, so I'll talk to you about your task first, and then we'll discuss how we're going to do it. So you'll see I'm speaking from slide number 13. So in a group of about 5 to 6 people, which we'll put you in, collectively choose one active learning technique and discuss how you could adapt it to remote teaching. So we'll ask you to take some notes of your brainstorming on your slide. And one good practice is to assign a note taker or a scribe just to keep track, and then one person to keep an eye on the collaborate chat function. We added this actually because last week we learned very quickly that some people don't realize they're back in the main room. And for about a full minute, we kept hearing somebody in another group that thought they were just talking in their own group. So another that you can do as a moderator or as a facilitator is when people come back into the main room, you might want to try to mute them all as they come back in. That's what we ended up having to do. So how will we do this activity? If I'm on to slide number 14 now. So if you find slide number 16 and onward, that set of slides will be for your group work. We'll randomly assign you to a breakout room and give you a group number between 1 and 7. So you would go to the group number on your corresponding slide. So for example, if you're put in group number 2, then you would go to the slide that says group number 2. And we're going to give you 8 minutes for this activity. And again, we'll give you that 1 minute heads up through the chat function when there's a minute remaining in your breakout room. So have someone keep an eye on that so you know when you're coming back in. And then we'll automatically bring you back to the room after 8 minutes. If you have questions throughout this, we as facilitators kind of tour through the rooms from time to time. And you can ask us then, but we might not get to every room. So we encourage you to put questions into the chat function, but ensure that it's set to everyone, because the only way we'll see it is if you set that chat function to everyone rather than your breakout room. So again, protocols and good habits. When you're in the big, large group of collaborate, keeping your microphone off and your camera off or muted is a good practice. But when you're in these breakout rooms and small groups, this is a chance to create some human connection. So we encourage you to briefly introduce yourself to one another, unmute yourself and stay unmuted. And if you can, if you feel comfortable, turn on your camera. It's another way to create more of a personal environment since you'll be in a small group. Okay, so Sue, how are you doing there for getting everybody arranged into groups?
Yep, we are all set to go here. I have the breakout room set. We're going to have 7 different groups. It looks like groups are size of 4 and 5 people per group.
Perfect.
All right. And Jens, just before we send people, is there any questions that have come up through the chat in terms of what's coming next?
Nothing in terms of this activity.
Okay. Is there anything
Great.
else you wanted to bring forward?
I think it's fine time-wise. I'm just going to respond to them in the chat.
Yeah, okay, perfect. And plus we will have time also in that other 30 minutes at the end. Okay, so we're going to send you now to your breakout rooms, and you have 8 minutes for those conversations. So enjoy.
All right. So I think we are close to having everybody back in the main room. Give a heads up, or sorry, give a thumbs up in the chat option if you can hear us all right. I think everything should be working well. Yep, perfect. Okay. So the only, as a facilitator, the only time that gets a bit dicey sometimes with these breakout groups, again, is when you come back, because some people may not have known that you're coming back. So we have, Jens actually found a button that is mute all. So he just used that in order to help us get everybody muted again. So for this, I'm going to switch your attention to slide number 23. And just let's have a conversation about how the experience was for group work. And this time, instead of me writing them out or annotating what I'm hearing, I'm going to have you write it out, and I will start talking through what I hear. And if there's something maybe that I want to ask further questions on, I'll ask whoever wrote that to respond in more detail. So feel free. I'm just going to wait a moment. Time went by so fast. Yes, so this is a big one. These breakout rooms, obviously, you're going to use them and assign timelines that work well for you. I think that we're noticing that with a lot of online and remote teaching, the first 2 or 3 minutes is just people getting acquainted with their new space and getting acquainted with one another. So often they don't get to the task for a few minutes at least. The feedback I got from my students is correct. It's quite abrupt to return. Yeah, I think this is something that needs to be updated on in Collaborate. This seems to be the most awkward thing about it. You know, even though we tried to give a 1-minute heads up, it still doesn't seem to give a really clear sound or any indication that you're coming back. It was good to meet people face to face. That's great. We need much more time. Yeah, this was just a kind of quick and dirty, this is the experience, this is what it's like. Is there any way we can choose to return to the main room? I know that moderators can move between rooms. Jens and Sue move between rooms?
Yeah, you have the option to set up for your participants to be able to move between rooms. So that rather than necessarily keeping it random, people could choose to move around, which I believe means they could choose to come back to the main room as well.
Right. Yeah. Okay, great. So you can basically choose that option. Certainly, as a facilitator, I think it just takes a little bit of practice to move between rooms with ease. The good thing about these slides and having people work on them in real time is that we're able to see what you're writing. We don't necessarily have to eavesdrop on your conversation, but we can see what you're writing. So we were able to see certain groups that might need us to pop into the room if they hadn't started recording anything. So that's helpful to see what's going on the slide. You need to factor in more time for introductions than in person. Absolutely. We have heard this again and again, is that introductions take longer when it's online. So a lot of these challenges are time oriented. which again speaks to this idea of being compassionate with yourselves and adjusting the expectations of how much you can achieve in the time that you have. Found it awkward and will need to practice. Yeah, and I'd like to just emphasize that I used this forum with my students for the last few weeks of the semester, and the first couple sessions were pretty awkward and clunky, but people got the hang of it pretty quickly. And so just identifying that there will be a learning curve for everybody involved, and then once it's part of a routine, it can actually be working pretty well. So I'm cognizant of time, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. Thank you everybody for your participation in that. Again, I just recommend you adjusting the timelines to however you see fit. So Sue, I'll pass it over to you for the virtual gallery walk.
Great. Okay, thanks, Kari. Okay, so some of you had mentioned as that early chat had gone on, thinking about different active learning techniques, some of you mentioned, what's a gallery walk? So here we are today asking you to take part in a virtual gallery walk. So typically, if we were in a classroom, for example, you might have various groups working on a certain assignment or a task, maybe putting together a poster, something like that, and then you would spend some time having your students circulate around the room and reviewing and brainstorming along with these other groups. So that's what we're going to have you do here today. We want you to be looking at what the group you were not in for that last brainstorming exercise, okay? So that's going to be the virtual gallery walk. You're going to have the chance now, we're going to give you about 4 minutes to look through what the other groups that you were not in, what came up on their slides, what did they come up with on their brainstorming. And as you know, we're all collaborating on these same set of slides, so feel free to add your own comments. Okay, add your own questions that come up as you read what some of your peers were discussing. Okay, so we're going to take about 4 minutes here. We want you to go to that other tab, but make sure you're mindful of 2 things. You're already muted. Your audio is already muted. Your video is probably off. But be mindful of hearing us when we draw everybody back after 4 minutes. Okay, just be mindful of the time. We don't want you to miss out on the last bit of debrief and whatnot after we put ourselves back together. Okay, so enjoy your virtual gallery walk. Okay, everyone, I'm going to try to draw your attention back here to the main room. We're going to draw an end to the virtual gallery walk. And so please, hopefully you're hearing my voice and you're able to focus again. Maybe you can send me a thumbs up in that chat function that you're back on the collaborate and you're able to hear us and do some debriefing. Okay, there we go. Lots of people are here with us. Okay, and if there's some others still virtually walking around, hopefully they'll hear us chatting here. So that was a virtual gallery walk. I find it pretty interesting. As I was looking through those collaborative slides, right, I could see people adding and commenting and things like that. So that's pretty interesting. Obviously today, this was we did not give you sufficient time really for any of these activities, but we really just wanted to have you have the experience and think about it in practice. So now we're just going to get to a little bit of debrief here. And I know there's been lots of great ideas and sharing going on in the chat. Wondering if a couple people who are feeling really brave want to raise their hand and use their voice and share out with the rest of the group. But is there maybe one idea, one highlight for you from today, or something that really stuck out? Perhaps it's something from your small groups, or okay, Brett, I'm calling on you. Your hand is raised. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. People who know me will be very surprised that I'm speaking. Honestly, it's just nice to know that everybody's in the same boat. That we're all just struggling, trying to find ideas and ways of making this work for us.
Right.
And so I really appreciate that. And one of the reasons I actually think it's abrupt is I think I'm still using sessions like this to get my social time in. So thank you guys.
Well, that's great. I hope that in those, we only gave you 8 minutes in those small groups, but hopefully that was a little bit of time. And if you're able to stay after, we can have a bit more of an open conversation. So that's great, Brett. Thanks.
Those small groups can also be done quite effectively asynchronously. So, the gallery walk. So you could have students do the breakout room, and then asynchronously you could have them at their own leisure go through and do the gallery walk another time.
Yeah, good point, Kari. That's great. Okay, I see another hand raised. This is great. Is it Farzana? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving us the experience that students probably will go through. It was my first time, to be honest, to put myself in a student's position in an online classroom and try to actively engage in a discussion. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. And that's really, and like Kari and I mentioned, it's hard to practice this because you can't practice it unless you have a group of people. So that's really what we designed this session for. So we hope that was helpful. Yeah. Okay, in the interest of time, and because there's no other hands up, and anybody else, feel free. We've been doing, a lot of sharing in the chat. So feel free, if you want to share a highlight or a takeaway for you, please go ahead and share that in the chat. I'm going to turn it over to you, Kari, for some last-minute wrap-up.
Sure. I've been seeing quite a few people in the chat asking whether they have permission to use the slide deck, use certain slides. Absolutely. We hope this will be a resource for you. So feel free to copy this slide deck if it's helpful, and discard what you want or don't want. We are hoping that we provide a number of resources that are useful for you. Before we let you go, please take some time to fill out that workshop confirmation form and the feedback survey. It really helps us to know what is working for you, and if you have needs that are not being met so far, like what kind of workshops can we prepare that would really help you. And then we will be having a follow-up consultation and discussion right now for the next 30 minutes, totally optional. But sometimes these have been really rich discussion spaces where people are sharing ideas. Certain faculty members have put forth really great ideas that they've been using. And then finally, on that last page, I think we have a resources page, and it's slide number 29. So we've added a bunch of links that might be helpful to you. And we also ask you to add questions as you come across them or have them, and we'll try to provide the answers. If we don't have them in the next 30 minutes, we'll try to provide the answers in the next couple of days. So feel free to check back on this slide deck. It will remain, I can't say indefinitely, but for a long time. Okay.
Do you mind if I say one quick thing?
Everybody wants to get for.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to let you know that this happened to me a couple times in Blackboard too. When I was teaching, I just got a blue screen of death on my computer. So take these things in stride. I had to reboot and rejoin back in.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Technology is unpredictable. Yeah.
Yeah, we've done this session. This is our third time. It's gone very smoothly 2 times and very clunky 1 time. And so it's really hard to predict what will go wrong in any given moment. So yeah, just being compassionate with ourselves is a good practice. So if Jens, Sue, do you have any last comments to make before we say goodbye to those who won't be joining for the post session?
No, I'm good. Jens, anything from you?
Okay.
No, I had lots of conversations. Yes, consider the time, and there was some conversation around bandwidth, which, yeah, I do recommend focusing on asynchronous activities as much as possible and keeping the synchronous to a minimum to preserve bandwidth and access for your students.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Definitely.
Brett, or Jens.
Thank you, Jens.
Okay, thanks everybody.
And thanks everybody for joining, and stick around if you'd like to continue chatting with us.
Yeah, thanks.
Cheers.